to the Speaker. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I love the way the DG Nimasa put it when he was speaking, that we should try and listen to the voice of the ocean. Because the voice of the ocean speaks to the soul. The touch of the sea is very sensuous, enfolding our bodies in its soft, close embrace. And that's the same way we expect it to enfold our economy across the continent. Let me see if you can hear the voice of the ocean as I invite this man, representing the CEO of Mars Group Worldwide, Mr. Soren Skov. I'd like to welcome here Mr. David Skov, Head India, Middle East, and Africa of APM Terminals, for his keynote address. Can we put our hands together for him as he steps forward here? Thank you very much. He's a very tall man. I welcome you.
His Excellency, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, ably represented by His Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. His Excellency, the Speaker, House of Representatives, Right Honorable Yakubu Dogara. His Excellency, the Secretary General, International Maritime Organization, Mr. Kitak Lim, ably represented by Mr. William Asu. His Excellency, the Honorable Minister of Transportation, Right Honorable Oji Emeji, other ministers here presented, the Chief of Naval Staff, the Director General and Chief Executive Officer in NIMASA, Dr. Dakuku Peterside, the Chief Executive Officers of African Maritime Administrations here present, heads of government agencies here present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to accept this invitation on behalf of my CEO, Søren Skov, to today talk about maritime trade facilitation and economic development in Africa. According to the African Development Bank, a significant decline in Africa's poverty will require the continent's GDP to grow at an overall average of 7%. In order to achieve this goal, it is of paramount importance that Africa's international trade continues and strengthens its current development. According to the Doing Business Index by the World Bank, a 1% increase in trade is associated with more than a 0.5% increase in income per capita in economies with flexible entry regulations. The gains of trade-enabling measures can contribute to broader objectives such as private sector development, education, foreign direct investments, market integration, economic growth, and employment. All players across the value chain, i.e. governments, shippers, customers, etc., need to collaborate in order for the society to get the full benefit from the efforts. Trade between Africa and the rest of the world has increased by 200% since the year 2000. But the African continent and its regional economic communities have recorded less intra-regional trade than most other regions of the world. According to data from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, inter-Africa trade amounts to only about 14% as compared to inter-regional trade among Latin American countries, which is 22%, Asian countries as 52%, and Europe at about 70%. One of the major factors behind this low level of trade integration is the low level of trade facilitation implementation. As we all know, maritime transport is essential to the world trade. Over 80% of the volume of world merchandise trade is carried by sea, and an even higher percentage of developing country trade is carried in ships. Global seaborne trade and world merchandise trade have both been growing at a faster rate than global GDP since 1990. according to the UNCTAD Maritime Review of 2016. This showed the increasing importance of transportation infrastructure investment, such as ports, terminals, and cargo inland services, to overall economic growth and rising standards of living, particularly in economically developing areas currently underserved by modern transportation networks and access. This development has gone hand in hand with an increase in the volumes of traded goods transported by sea. In 2007, international seaborne trade was estimated at 8 billion tons of goods loaded. During the past 3 decades, the annual average growth rate of world seaborne trade is estimated as 3.1%. Dry cargo, meaning bulk, breakbulk, and containerized cargo, accounted for almost 70% of the goods loaded. The rest is oil and petroleum transport. Seaborne trade surpassed 10 billion tons in 2015 and continues to represent the overwhelming majority of the more than US $16 trillion in global merchandise trade by volume as well as value. More than half of all seaborne trade by value moves in containers, with emerging economies of Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and Africa accounting for most of current shipping market expansions. A breakdown of the group of developing countries shows that goods are predominantly loaded in Asia, with about 40% of the total goods loaded, then followed by the Americas with about 15%, Africa with 10.5%, and 53% of the volume of world seaborne trade is unloaded in developed countries. The development in international trade and transport has been promoted by several factors. Tariff and other barriers to trade have decreased through multilateral negotiations in the World Trade Organization and through regional and bilateral agreements. Maritime transport systems have also evolved to today's container ships, taking advantage of economies of scale. The cost of maritime transport have declined over time. The WTO World Trade Report 2008 cites 3 main technological and institutional changes as reasons for the lowering of shipping costs. First, the development of open registered shipping, scale effects from increased trade, and containerization. So let's look a bit on the relationship between trade and economical growth. According to a study by the Swedish Maritime Administration, openness to trade is one of the several important factors to achieve economic growth. Countries that are open to trade have had faster economic growth than countries that have been more closed to trade. Greater openness to trade is clearly associated with faster economic growth, but is not the only factor contributing to growth. Other factors such as technical innovation, and responsible economic policy, and education are also necessary. Trade contributes to a positive economic development both by generating incomes from export as well as by importing products in demand. Through trade, both the exporting and importing country can take advantage of their respective resources and relative competitive advantage in a more efficient way and contribute to the diffusion of new knowledge through technology transfer. Access to a larger and richer market is a key factor to enabling local producers generate the level of demand required to exploit economies of scale. Through specialization and economies of scale, the production cost per unit decreases as production rises. Prices are also lowered by the competition that comes from trade. The combination of lowered prices and specialized products is beneficial for consumers. Trade creates conditions for economic growth, which in its turn is a precondition for poverty alleviation. Developing countries are a diverse group with differing trade patterns, natural resources, factor endowments, and comparative advantages. Trade has an effect on growth, employment, revenue, consumer prices, and government spending in a country, which all in turn had an effect on the poor in a bid to alleviating poverty. In general, there are direct and indirect effects of trade. Increased trades as an effect of liberalization or reduction of trade barriers directly affects the prices in the market. How the consumers are affected by these price changes in a specific sector depends if they are net producers or net consumers. For example, fishermen in a closed market might be negatively affected by increased import of fish and a lowering of prices, whereas the consumers in the same market will benefit from lower prices. How price changes impact the consumers also depends on the cost for distribution, the way markets are structured, and domestic taxes and regulations. However, not all developing countries have managed to take advantage of the trade opportunities that come from globalization and increased trade facilitation, according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. The economic performance for developing economies in Africa remains below that recorded for developing countries as a whole. Africa's share in the total world export was 3.1% in 2007, and this share has been decreasing since the 1950s. High trade costs and supply-side constraints may be one explanation as to why countries in Africa are not able to take advantage of trading opportunities. One measure to address these constraints is to invest in physical infrastructure that is essential to carry out production and trade, so as to allow traders easier access to international markets. The Maersk Group, through its APM Terminals brand, is the largest port and terminal operating company in Africa, with more than 5 million TEUs handled in 2015. And APM Terminals is in particular well represented in West Africa, with 10 facilities in 8 countries, including our APM